I want to thank you all for joining. I'm introduced all of our speakers at once with Jeff Parker, Marsha Anderson Bomar, Chris Tomlinson, Cain Williamson, and Doug Hooker. So first off, I want to introduce Jeff Parker, who as a recognized national leader in transportation and transit. Jeff Parker has more than 30 years of experience in both the private and public sectors of the industry, heading operations and expansion programs in several multimodal transit agencies. Jeff was named CEO of the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority, MARTA, in March 2018, joining the organization after serving as the vice president of the Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee district of HNTB. So you're going to hear from Jeff. Next, you're going to hear from Marsha Bomar, who has an extensive resume as well, so it's hard to read all of y'all's resumes, so I apologize. Marsha Bomar serves as the Assistant General Manager for Capital Program Delivery. She founded Street Smarts in 1990 and Data Smarts in 1993, growing them more than 120 employees and annual revenues of almost 20 million. She created the Street Smarts Foundation as one vehicle for the firm's philanthropic activities. Marsha has an extensive record. She served also as the Gateway 85 CID Executive Director and also as a city councilman in Duluth. After Marsha, you're going to hear from Chris Tomlinson. So give me 1 second here, y'all. I apologize. I'm going through all these. Chris serves as the Executive Director of the State Road and Tollway Authority and the Georgia Regional Transportation Authority and the Executive Director of the newly created Atlanta Transit Link Authority. SRTA operates all the toll facilities within Georgia and serves as the transportation funding financing arm for the state. And then after Chris, you're going to hear from Cain Williamson, who's the Chief Planning Officer for SRTA also. And then to wrap it all up, you're going to hear from Doug Hooker, who's the Executive Director of the Atlanta Regional Commission. Doug Hooker leads the Atlanta Regional Commission, which helps local government leaders, their community partners, and residents improve the region's quality of life and address challenges of dynamic, turbulent future. The agency's work focuses on the challenges of aging and independent services, arts and culture, community development, community research, analytics, economic competitive, homeland security, transportation, mobility, water, natural resources, and workforce solutions. So that's a very quick intro to a lot of these great speakers. Let me tell y'all, we are very blessed to have these folks doing this for us. So I just want to extend my gratitude for them for coming on and taking their time to share kind of where we're going from here. And just thank you all for doing this. And Jeff, I'm going to hand it off to you and let you, Marsha, and Chris, Cain, and Doug go from there.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We've consolidated the presentation, so I'm gonna take the lead on the presentation, and then after all the presentations are done, if we have some questions, Marsha's gonna help me out with that. So, thank you to Advance Atlanta for pulling this together. It's great to hear the opening remarks and talking about how we have advanced transit here in the region and how we have a long way to go. I think it's always good to not only have progress, but have aspiration be, in front of us as well. And it's so important that groups like this provide a forum for advocacy because, quite frankly, we need all the help with this region as we go and move forward through the significant growth that we have in front of us and deal with the dramatic changes that are going on now, both related to COVID-19, but also, the realities of equity and making sure that we're providing services to our constituents in a truly equitable manner. So, really wanted to focus on a few things. Got a lot to talk about. I'm going to move along here quickly, but I think the first thing to point out is the dramatic effects, just in terms of how people are moving around. And where we are as a transit agency, MARTA, in terms of ridership. You can see a significant downturn in our ridership. The rail service has been most dramatically affected. Sort of not surprising that that has been a bigger impact than our bus service because the core of Midtown and downtown Atlanta and people who have changed, working out of their homes and whatnot, significant change. You know, the surprising aspect of our bus service is that it is not down as much. We've had to take some pretty dramatic steps with our bus service, which I'll talk about a little later. But we've only had some much smaller declines, I would say, compared to our peer agencies across the country. I would say our ridership decline in bus is nowhere near what our peer agencies are seeing across the country. So next slide, please. And obviously, the other impact is a financial one. No surprise as well. We've had a significant impact in revenue, although our expenses are pretty stable. There's a lot of information packed into this slide. This slide depicts both our expenses and our revenue for 2020, which ended on June 30th. The stacked colors represent our revenue, the revenue side of the business, and you can see how the bottom line, which our single largest source of sales tax, had a pretty dramatic decline. You know, a high in January of 28 million a month, coming into down to 18.75 in May. Our sales tax lags, so the receipts are about a month and a half behind the actual month when you or I would have paid that sales tax. And we also had a very significant decline, as you can see in our passenger revenue, our fare box. You know, the money that's paid our fare boxes and at our station gates, and you can see, you know, $10 million a month, and now it's squeezed down to 2.7, just a dramatic, significant decrease, although we have started collecting fares on our bus system fairly recently, and we do see an increase in that. So the net effect of that has been a significant hole in our budget. The red line shows our expenses that we have, and without some CARES Act money that's coming through the FTA, and that's that triangle on the right, the orange triangle on the right, which is money that we were able to prop up our budget and make sure that we have a stable budget going forward. Now I don't have a slide for this, but I think the longer term picture is equally important. We've received about $299 million of CARES Act funds. That gives us stability in terms of our operating budget and our capital budget through 2024. In 2024, if we continue to spend at the rate that we're spending, we will have about a $60 million hole in our capital budget. Seems pretty dramatic. $60 million out of about $550 million, $60 million on our operating budget, $60 million out of a budget of about $550 million. While it's significant, we do believe that through some efficiencies and, you know, maybe a potential fare hike down the road, that we can close that gap in 2024 and beyond, have a balanced budget when the CARES Act money that we have lapses. So next slide, please. But it's important to remember, I'm sure others are going to get into this, and we're well aware that we are in a region that is growing incredibly fast. You know, we talked about being, you know, third fastest-ish growing metropolitan area in the country. We're going to, you know, the predictions would have us surpassing Miami and Philadelphia and Boston. So just a significant growth. I suspect that while I'm not a person who tracks this, I just report it and pay a lot of attention to it, that the growth that, you know, while we have an impact in front of us, I think the growth is going to be there in the long run. And clearly, as you all know, supporting transit, investing in transit is going to be a key success factor in the ability to allow a growing population to move around, allow density to happen in the core parts of our city, and ultimately, allow the population's trends to actually happen and not be constricted by lack of mobility. So next slide. So we can't forget that as we think about the short-term problems that we have relative to COVID-19. But with all of the impacts in what's going on in terms of keeping our employees and our customers safe, and the impacts to our budget, and the uncertainty about what transit looks like, and who's going to come back to the office, and all of those things that we need to be concerned about, we have a whole lot of infrastructure at MARTA that we need to continue to maintain, and we've made a decision and a financing plan that continues to invest in a level way with our infrastructure, what we call our state of good repair. We're making an unprecedented investment in purchasing new rail cars and replacing our aged rail car fleet. We've begun for the first time in MARTA's history a comprehensive overhaul of our stations that is sorely needed in many cases. This is one of the early activities that we've done on the East Line. Over about a 7-year period, we'll be overhauling each one of our stations. Work's going to begin very soon at College Park and Airport, and some other stations critically important. Overhauling our elevators and escalator continues, something that hasn't been done in years, and a continued investment in parts of the infrastructure that are critical to our delivering service, but aren't really measured all that well by the customers who ride. The track infrastructure is an important piece. We have some major investments that will be made beginning in February. We'll actually have to have a 5-day shutdown of our service north of Lindbergh, and a significant operation to move customers around for that. So next slide, please. So while we have a significant capital program dedicated to maintaining the infrastructure we have, a big piece of this, and the piece of this that's going to allow us to continue to prosper as a region, is that investment that we're calling More MARTA, that allows us to invest in expanding transit in the region. I truly believe that we're blessed here in Atlanta. We've got a heavy rail system that provides a huge amount of efficiency, that has even pre-COVID 19 significant capacity to support growth, and we believe we have working with our jurisdictions, a great plan to move people to our rail stations more efficiently, more effectively, more attractively, funded in Clayton County and in the city of Atlanta, somewhat aspirational in DeKalb County with their county transit plan, and Fulton County with their county transit plan, but a way of providing additional funds. And so, we will be investing over the next decades in our jurisdictions, primarily right now in Atlanta and Clayton County, to improve service, get people into our rail system more effectively, but also to improve just bus service in general, making them more efficient and more effective with BRT and arterial bus rapid transit. So we're looking forward to bringing really new opportunities and new modes into the system. Summerhill BRT will be the first of its kind here in Atlanta. We're excited about that. I could spend hours talking about our program, but we'll move on to the next slide. As I said, aspirational, DeKalb County, Fulton County, within our jurisdiction, have laid out just great plans to expand transit. as you all know, Gwinnett County has done the same, made a decision to hold a referendum to expand transit. On that referendum is an opportunity to expand MARTA into Gwinnett County. So we at MARTA, while we're working with Gwinnett County now, we continue to work with them and hope to bring that to fruition and really see the opportunity in November. A really huge step in terms of regional transit here in Metro Atlanta. Next slide. But really another important piece of what we're doing, and sort of connected to our capital program, is investing in the land that we own. We're a major landowner in this region, and transit-oriented development is a key part of our portfolio. We've been advancing major, some very major, and some smaller TOD projects around the region. These range from a very small development over the head house at Peachtree Center next to the Ellis Hotel to massive commercial real estate opportunities above some of our stations in Midtown. And while these are all exciting opportunities to invest around our stations, build density around our stations, what's most exciting to me is, and it's hard to see on this slide, but it's incredibly impactful, is the commitment that this agency has made to affordable housing. Most of our major developments opportunities, we've included affordable housing in them. King Memorial has broken ground. Edgewood Candler Park is open. Avondale is open. We've got great opportunities around. We've got some significant opportunities around 6 stations that are within opportunity zones that give better economic conditions to developers to develop the property and opportunity zones. So we really look to not only build density around our stations, but more importantly, build it in a way that meets the needs of the communities that we serve. And clearly at the very tippity top of that list of the needs of the communities that we serve is affordable housing. So we are committed to just continue to drive home an investment in affordable housing around this region. So next slide, please. So what are we doing in these major changes that are going on related to COVID-19? Listed to the side of this are some of the tactics that we've done. We have signed a pledge that all of the major transit agencies have pledged to both protect our employees and our customers. I think one of the most remarkable things that we've done, when we looked around our system, even prior to the mayor of Atlanta and some other communities putting in mask requirements, we saw about 35% of our patrons wearing masks. We stepped up, committed to just en masse hand out masks throughout our system. We now have them available in our stations, in our buses, handing them out proactively, requiring people to wear them, and the net effect of that is one that's going to lead to literally saving lives with 90% of our patrons wearing masks. Obviously, cleaning, social distancing, all those techniques, things that we're committed to making sure that we do to build the confidence that as this great economy of Metro Atlanta picks up, that people have the confidence to come back to public transportation. And with that, I will turn it over, and my assumption is that I will just turn it right over to my good friend, Chris Tomlinson, since he's already been introduced.
Thank you, Jeff. So good evening, everybody. Again, echoing Jeff's comments, thank you to Advance Atlanta for this opportunity. I don't think Jeff or I or Marsha or Cain ever pass up an opportunity to really try to talk about what we're doing and where we're trying to collectively take this region. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So what I want to do with our time is give you a little bit of overview of what the ATL is about. As sort of the newest kid on the block, being just about 2 years old, you probably still have a lot of questions about that. Then we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into what we're doing with the regional transit plan, and then come back up for a broad look at where do we see things heading and what are we trying to accomplish. So the ATL, the Atlanta Region Transit Link Authority, it is our relatively new region-wide transit planning entity. It marks the first time that the state has decided to get involved with regional planning, and it really marks an acknowledgement by the state of how critical transit and transit infrastructure is to support the ongoing growth of this region, and by extension, the economic impact that has on the entire region as well as the state. Our key functions focus around coordinating regional partners. So you just heard from MARTA, which represents over 95% of the transit trips within the 13 county region. That's the jurisdiction of the ATL. But some people don't realize that there's additional 12 other operators in this region. So we are blessed to have one of the largest transit operators in the country with MARTA. And we spend a lot of time talking about how do we either connect into and/or extend those operations beyond the counties that MARTA is operating in, because we know that our commute patterns in this region extend beyond. And MARTA's customers, for example, don't all live in their jurisdiction, but they rely on that system when they're traveling through the core of the region. We're also focused on strengthening regional transit planning performance. And one of the key ways we're doing that is related to the regional transit plan, which we'll talk about here in a moment. And we are trying to advocate both at the state level, federal level, for additional transit investment. You heard at the top when James introduced me, I'm fortunate to serve as the head of 2 other state mobility authorities. So we are multimodal in our approach. We are mode agnostic. We are transit fans. We believe there is a place for vehicles, but we think that transit is probably the single greatest underinvested part of our transportation infrastructure, thus this focus, thus the creation of the ATL. At the end of the day, we're not doing this for ourselves. At the end of the day, what matters most is customer experience. And so a lot of the conversations we have internally and externally are focused on what will be the long-term impact of these investments. How will it make it better for customers, be that the occasional customer, be that the commuter? And we think one of the ways that we will help facilitate the collaboration and go from taking our world-class operators into a more seamless and cohesive network is through leveraging technology and being innovative in our approaches. So that's what we're really about. How do we unify? How do we take and leverage the great assets that we already have to either build upon them or to create a more seamless network? Next slide. One of the ways we're doing that is to focus on what we call the the ATL Regional Transit Plan, or the ARTP. Now, in this region, we are not short on planning, and the focus of adding one more plan to the mix is to create a single place where you can see all of these projects that are being worked on by the various providers and jurisdictions in one place. This is a collaborative process. It starts, as you can see on the screen on the far left, with the plans that are coming and being identified at the local or operator level. It flows into bringing those together, cataloging them, if you will, into a cohesive regional transit plan. We do this so that you can have one place to look at all the potential investments that are being considered, but we also do it so that we can take a look, because we know that the need is great, but the available resources are limited. So we want to have one place where you can see the various projects that are competing for federal or state funds. This is a state level and regional effort. So our work product flows into the regional transportation plans and the federally required plans that are governed by ARC, the Atlanta Regional Commission. And that's something that I'm sure Doug Hooker will talk about. But what we want to do now is give you a little bit of a deep dive into what's behind this regional transit plan, because we're in the middle of an update. And for that, I'm going to call on Cain Williamson to give you an update on where we are in that process. So next slide, and Cain, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Chris. As Chris mentioned, we are in the thick of the update of the ATL Regional Transit Plan. You can see here there are 4 major milestones in this process that we've been underway with now since about February. We kicked off the process by reviewing the methodologies that we used in the last plan update, which we adopted in December of 2019. We held a call for projects and have been evaluating those projects over the course of the last 3 or 4 months. And now we're in the middle of our public outreach, which is serendipitous for us, given that we are able to talk to you all today. And there'll be a little bit more about that public outreach process later. And then we will adopt the, this updated plan in December of this year. So if you can advance to the next slide. So as I mentioned, we have been evaluating the plan and the projects for a while now, and you can see here on the screen the some of the high-level results from the analysis of those plans and the projects. Those that second ring of items there are the governing principles that we use to evaluate the plan and process, and then those outer call-out boxes are just some little data points about how the plan as a whole has performed on these issues. So you can see there the economic development and land use goal. You can see that we've seen a 31% increase in transit trips to employment centers as a result of the set of projects that are in this plan working cohesively together. Just a couple of other items I'll call out that are of interest. I think we've analyzed the return on investment of the investment that we would make in this plan. It's about a 5-to-1 investment. So there's a substantial return on the amount of money that you would expect to see spent to implement the plan as it stands now. Mobility and access, we expect to see a 39% increase in transit trips for all ATL residents and a 34% increase in transit trips by zero-car households. I think that speaks to the idea that zero-car households are probably already higher users of transit than the general public might be. On innovation, something that's pretty interesting here, 31% of all the projects that we received include some sort of transit signal priority element. And that's a pretty big step forward, I think, in how we think about the integration of the existing system, roadway system, with the transit system. So we're pretty excited about that. And then the equity issue is a driving one for us. What I would point out here is that second bullet, which is a little hard to read probably on your screen. But basically, we, as it stands now, 22% of all jobs in the region are within a half mile of a high capacity transit station. And if we were to implement this plan as it stands, we would have 51% of jobs within half a mile of a high capacity transit station, which is about 133% increase over today. And that's a pretty big deal. And then a couple of interesting bullets there at the top for the environmental sustainability. You can see the large reduction in greenhouse gases that would be removed from the system if we were to implement this plan. It's equivalent to planting about 33,000 trees on an annual basis. So we're pretty excited about all of those advantages of the plan. You can push us to the next slide.
Cain, let me jump in there on the next slide. What we're trying to do with this, and it's a lot of statistics, but we're trying to help bolster the business case for making the much needed investment. You know, these projects, how they fit in at the local level, agencies such as MARTA, Gwinnett County Transit, Cobb Link, are identifying those projects that they believe truly move the needle. But what we're trying to do is serve as an independent source to say, if these projects are supported, if we make these investments, this can truly make a difference. But what this next slide is talking about is we really want to try to go from planning to funding. Like I said earlier, we don't suffer from a lack of good plans. We suffer from a lack of funding. So what we're hoping will be different with the ATL is you will be able to see over time how these projects move forward. Either how they finally make it into what's called a TIP, which is our 6-year fiscally constrained plan, again, managed by ARC, as well as where they sit as they go through the long range plan, which is our 20-year list. But what you see on the right side is we're trying to introduce a new element. Under the ATL's statute, the ATL every single year can identify a subset of projects in the plan that the ATL board feels will truly move the needle, that are at a point in their development where they could use a funding boost from the state to help move them forward to the next step into becoming a reality. And so this year is the first year that we identified projects. And again, it's small on here. We'll work with Advanced Atlanta to send out this information. You can certainly find information on the ATL website. But we identified 9 projects that are in alignment with the ATL's governing principles, but more importantly, are high-performing projects that with the assistance of additional funding, we may be able to accelerate the delivery of those projects or move them forward. One of the key aspects that we look at, because there's a lot of good projects that aren't on that list, but we're looking at state bond funding, and a key element is, will these projects be able to utilize any funding that the state would put forward within the next 3 to 5 years? So again, moving from planning to looking at those projects that are going to become reality. Because of COVID-19, we're waiting to see where the state budget is, to see what level of funding, if any, goes towards this list. But we're excited that this is literally baked into the law, baked into the DNA of the ATL. Next slide. The information that Cain was talking about, as far as it comes to the regional transit plan, we are about to embark on what we call district downloads. The ATL is broken into 10 districts, and what we're going to do is we're going to combine 2 districts into each of our district download meetings. These will be virtual online meetings where we'll talk about the projects that were submitted into the plan that affect that geographic area. We'll also do a 6th meeting for those that miss any of the individual district download meetings. And we're trying to take this post-pandemic world that we're living in as an opportunity to try some new virtual techniques. But we also want to make sure that we didn't forget those who may not have the technology to get involved and join a meeting like this online. So we have ways where people can provide input via text. And we're also working with people to have other, we'll call them analog ways to provide input. So you'll be hearing more from the ATL as these October dates come up. Next slide. Coming back up, why are we doing all this? Like I said, we want to create a seamless and truly customer-focused transit network. We're blessed with great systems. Jeff didn't mention in his remarks, but kudos to MARTA. as transit agencies around this country struggle to deal with the financial impact, not all of them are in as good a financial shape as MARTA. That's not to say MARTA hasn't been hit, but there are transit systems that are teetering on bankruptcy, and a lot of credit goes to the good financial stewardship and plans that MARTA has made, that they're able to continue to deliver service as well as move the capital plans forward, because there's a lot of regions that are just trying to survive. We're going to continue our focus on improved regional coordination, and one of the hallmarks and aspects and unique qualities of this region is we are looking and working not only in the transit community, but across other modes. So many of you have heard myself, Jeff, GDOT talking about Georgia 400, where we're building express lanes, but we're making sure that it is built out ready to add BRT. These partnerships that go across modes and this focus on multimodal corridors is something that you don't see everywhere, and is one of, I think, of the forward-thinking leadership that we have here. And lastly, because I want to make sure I leave plenty of time for our good friend, Doug Hooker, efficiently leveraging technology. Both the ATL, MARTA, and many of our partners are looking at how we leverage technology, everything from GPS and bus location systems to smartphone-based technology, and even innovative partnerships to help get information out. And MARTA, which, full disclosure, I sit on MARTA's board, but MARTA just announced a very unique partnership to get information out at the, I believe Jeff was quoted, the hyper-local level, to push information to neighborhoods. So you're blessed, everyone's truly blessed to live in what I believe is one of the more innovative regions in terms of looking at our transportation needs. So anyway, I look forward to your questions. This is really just tip of the iceberg for us. There's so much going on, and it's really a good time to be focused on these investments, even while we try to deal with the ongoing near-term effects of COVID. These investments are very important for the future of the region. So thank you, and well, I guess I'll pass it to Doug Hooker.
All right, I'm muted. I caught myself. I think that will be one of the signature phrases of 2020. You're on mute. So thank you, Chris. And let me say thanks very much to Alyssa and James for inviting me to be with you all this evening. Alyssa, if you don't mind, I'm going to take a bit of a speaker's privilege and acknowledge a few of the many wonderful people that are here with us this evening because of longtime friendships and some of how they've impacted my life and my career. I want to start with acknowledging Tad Leathead, who's with us. Tad was a longtime member of the ARC board, and in fact, he was the chairman who helped me launch my tenure at ARC. And but for his leadership and support and guidance, I probably wouldn't have been as successful out of the gate as I was. So thank you, Tad, for that. And Sam Owens, who's with us, also a longtime ARC board member years ago, and a board chairman for several years himself before he went off to serve as Georgia's Attorney General, and a longtime community leader for us. Several folks who are here with us tonight are folks that I have had the pleasure of working with at ARC before they went off to other horizons. Cain Williamson, for one, Ryan Ellis, Scott Haggard, who's also with the ATL. And then in my consulting days, I used to work with a young lady named Emily Ritzler and worked alongside of Marsha Bomar for many times. And then even earlier in my career when I was at the city, there's a young lady on the phone, on the conference now, who I worked with a lot, Fran Calhoun Phillips. So I just want to acknowledge a lot of great people I've had the pleasure of knowing through these years and being advised by. Alyssa mentioned at the very beginning of this, and I want to end my thanks to people here by saying that Advance Atlanta came out of the Millennial Advisory Panel initiative the ARC put together years ago. And she and James were some of the many active young people we had the pleasure of working with and helping us to understand priorities for your generation and what's important for you to stay invested in the region. But there's a young lady here tonight who was particularly helpful with that whole initiative, and that was Jen Graham. And Jen was the mastermind who developed the Civic Dinner concept and helped us to introduce it during the Millennium Advisory Panel process, where we began to experiment with it, learn with it, and glad to see that it has grown in the region and that you guys are using that format tonight. It's been a wonderful format. So thanks to all of you. I want to say, with all of the wrangling and bad news and everything coming out of Washington these days, there is actually something good that happened today, and I want to make a point of talking about it. It's in the realm of funding. The House passed today a continuing resolution that could keep the government open at least through the middle of December. But as a part of that passage, they also extended the FAST Act, which is federal transportation legislation. They extended the FAST Act for another year. And in doing that extension, there are small increases. There will be small increases, but notable increases in funding for transportation, including an additional $10.4 billion for the Highway Trust Fund, an additional $3.2 billion for mass transit, on top of the base amounts that were in the original bill. And so that's a little bit of good news, and we're glad to know that something good still is happening in Washington despite everything else that's going on. So now, speaking of funding, let me go to the next slide and talk a little bit more about how the pandemic has impacted our local transportation revenues. So you see here, looking at the city of Atlanta and our core counties, that beginning in basically March, most of our core counties took a large dip in their SPLOST and T-SPLOST. Took a large hit on their SPLOST and T-SPLOST revenue collections. And you can see year to date from January through the end of July how far down they've been. The city, of course, has taken a huge hit because the hospitality industry, convention business has been hit a lot, and a lot of their sales tax revenue comes from that part of our economy. As we're coming to July and looking into August, most of the counties are beginning to emerge out of that. Next slide. And so if you look at what happened in our outlying counties, they never really, for the most part, they never really took a hard hit from this. And in fact, they actually have seen increases. We suspect, although we can't say definitively, we suspect the reason for this is that a lot of the travel that used to be done by going in town to jobs was travel that converted to economic activity in their home county. So a lot of people who were normally traveling and spending money in the core counties while being employed were staying home or staying in their home communities. And as such, a lot of their dollars returning over in their home community. So that's what we surmise might be the reason. But again, we don't know definitively if that's the reason. But as you see, with the exception of Dawson, Douglas, and Fayette, most of the outer counties have year over year experienced significant increase in their SPLOST and T-SPLOST revenues. And that's a good thing. Nobody wants to see anybody hurt by it. And even the Fayette, Douglas, and Dawson are beginning to have a more optimistic picture there as we come into the fall. Next slide, please. So no surprise to everybody, this is what our vehicle miles traveled looked like. Obviously, beginning of March, when the quarantine set in, we had a huge dip in that. And I imagine all of us at some point in time had ventured out in March or April and thought, well, wow, wouldn't it be great if travel by car was like this all the time? But obviously it will not be. And as you see, it's already beginning to creep back up to pre-pandemic levels. But this is a transit conversation. So why do we care about what's happened with vehicle miles traveled by cars? Next slide, please. And the reason is why is because we still need, next slide. There you go. Thank you. Much of our transit expansion is going to depend upon roadway expansion, and that is the extension of the managed lanes program undertaken by Georgia DOT will provide the surface by which the BRT network in the region will begin to flourish. Those buses and bus rapid transit vehicles operated by MARTA, by the ATL, and by any local governments, Gwinnett, Cobb, those things will be traveling on an expanded managed lanes network as we begin to expand managed lanes up 400. We've already built them out, I-85, but we'll be built, and of course, on 75 coming into the perimeter, we've done that, but we still have a lot more work to do. And a lot of our bus rapid transit lanes will be actually in those corridors. And so that's why it's important also that the investment is not going only in the transit infrastructure, but in the surface transportation infrastructure as well. Next slide. But everything post-pandemic is going to be, we think, a very different world. All of us have experienced, I think, quarantining and teleworking from home. Many of you probably are aware of the fact that ARC manages the Georgia Commute Options Program. At the request of DOT, we've been doing that for a few years now. And in managing that program, we normally would advise and try to encourage employers, whether they're government employers, private businesses, or others, to start or offer telecommute. And although we had a pretty decent telecommute program prior to the pandemic changed everything. And the amount of requests we have for technical assistance in helping employers and local governments set up telework programs wasn't overwhelming. It was actually refreshing, but it kept that part of our team busy, and they still are. And in doing so, we have wondered, as many people have wondered, how much did our commute behavior change with adopting telework? How much will that stick as we begin to emerge from the pandemic? And so we did a survey in April, and we just redone it in August. And just sharing you real quickly what that survey said. Surveying over 2,300 people who work in the region and surveying a couple of hundred employers, both large scale, mid-sized, and small businesses. These are some of the things that we got back. That before the pandemic, most people who telecommute were only doing it 1-2 days a week. And as you see, the plurality, we're never doing it. As of April, however, over 2/3 of us were teleworking or working from home 5 days a week. And many people, of course, had changed that from the position of never having done it to having to do it all the time. When we refreshed this survey in August, asking again, how much were people teleworking, we still had roughly 2/3 of people that were teleworking 5 days a week. But most importantly for us is, what do people plan to do when it is, quote unquote, safe from a public health perspective to go back into normal office routines? And although we don't see it as high, what we have been told, what people are saying is, and this is coming from workers, is that they believe that they'll be working from home at least 3 days a week. At least 25% say that at least 3 days a week they'll be working from home. And 13% say they expect they'll be working from home every day of the week. And that'll be a significant shift, that 13% and 25%, 38% combined if you want to, a big shift from the 7% or fewer who were working 5 days or less from telework before the pandemic. Next slide. And then what do business executives think about this? And this is what their thoughts were from April as they had entered into the pandemic to August when they were fully into it and had their routines ongoing. Almost 70% of executives have shared, and this is across a scale of very small business to very big businesses, that they expect more of their employees will work from home at least periodically. And in many cases, they had never done that before. They had never offered that as a part of their strategy for employees. And so we think that's a significant change that will, or a significant change of mindset that will mean that how we adapt our transportation network going forward, and that'll have a huge impact likely on transit as well as surface transportation. So I just want to share all those kinds of things that we've been keeping track of, and say that there are big question marks out there for the region. I think on the whole, they're good, but we still have a lot of challenges, not the least of which is ensuring we're getting adequate funding federally and locally as we try to expand more transit options. As Chris said earlier, we are very much underfunded in the transit part of our infrastructure, and we all recognize that. Certainly you recognize that. That's why you've done the work that you've decided to do voluntarily to keep advancing transit as a part of the mix and keep the pressure on local and state leaders to support transit and transit expansion. So thank you for all that you guys are doing. And again, happy to be here. And that's it for me. Alyssa.
Thank you, Doug, and thank you to all of our speakers. We really appreciate you sharing your insights and expertise with us this evening, taking time out of your busy day to join us. And I don't think we'll have enough time for group questions from the whole group, but we hope that speakers, you'll join us in the breakout groups if you're able to stay with us. And now I'd like to ask Jen Graham, who's the expert on and creator of Civic Dinners, to explain how our breakout discussions will work.
Awesome. Thank you, Alyssa. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry. Just had some issues earlier with the sound. Thank you all to the speakers for sharing such insight on the state of transit and traffic in Atlanta. And kudos to Doug Hooker for just bringing us together. Advanced Atlanta wouldn't exist without the Millennial Advisory Panel. And I know it's just been a pleasure to see this organization grow over the last 4 years, being advocates for transit. So exciting to bring all of this together, and thrilled to introduce like the model of Civic Dinners. Also, because of COVID, we've gone through some changes and have converted our platform into a virtual experience. So thank you all for joining. What we're going to do is we're going to use the breakout rooms in Zoom. I'm sure most of you have maybe experienced this before already, but you will get an invite to join a breakout room, and please accept the invite, and then you'll be dispersed into groups of 6 to 8 people by your county. I know there are a handful of people who still haven't labeled their name with the county that they live in. I've sent private messages to a few of you already. So if you can, I'll just disperse everybody else at this moment, and I'll reassign and send you to the right group so that we can have the proper breakout rooms. But a way you can identify yourself is by clicking on participants and then clicking on your name in the top right, where you can click more and then rename yourself to add the county. Because what we're going to do is have county conversations where we dive into some 3 big questions, which is typical of a civic dinner, where we really try to get to the heart of the issues and maybe even some solutions and actions that we can tackle together within speaking to one another where we live. And the way it'll work is that you'll have a host in each breakout room. There's a designated host that will walk you through the questions. We'll post these also in the chat, and you'll be able to access those for the host. So with that, we definitely want to make the best use of your time. We want to wrap up by 7:30. So we'll keep the question, each round will be roughly 5 to 10 minutes. Make sure that everybody gets a chance to share, even briefly, before moving on to the next round. So I will disperse the rooms as is and then add others as you go. So please keep a lookout for your invitation to a breakout room and accept.